Yo, welcome to the next video in our video series on analyzing literature. This particular video is about close reading a passage. But before you can close read a passage, you actually have to choose a passage. So let's talk about how to choose a good passage to analyze. The first thing you're going to want to look for when you're trying to find a passage to analyze is finding one that has meaning and depth. And that's going to be somewhat subjective, somewhat different for every reader. But you're going to look for a passage that, when you read it, seemed like it was meaningful. It seemed important. The ideas were big. You're looking for big ideas, where the author's trying to get to something more than just plot. That's going to give you stronger central ideas, and the writer's usually going to break out their big guns in terms of technique and craft when they're writing those kinds of passages. Now, for Of Mice and Men, I looked in Chapter 2, and Chapter 2 was mostly dialogue, characters talking to each other. But then there was one longer paragraph, and that's how I found the meaningful passage I'm going to look at today. It just looked different on the page. Like all the talking between characters stopped, everything stopped for a minute, and the author, the narrator, described someone in great detail for the first time in the chapter. So that's one way I picked it. Another way is the language Steinbeck used in that passage seemed grander, bigger, more important. So that's another way I chose it. If you look in your book, you will likely find passages similar to that, where the author takes a break from the plot and wants to talk about ideas. Those are the good passages to use. This is the passage I chose. It's about Slim. It's when Slim walks in. And it says, "A tall man stood at the doorway. He held a crushed Stetson hat under his arm while he combed his long, black, damp hair straight back. Like the others, he wore blue jeans and a short denim jacket. When he had finished combing his hair, he moved into the room, and he moved with a majesty achieved only by royalty and master craftsmen. He was a jerk-line skinner, the prince of the ranch, capable of driving 10, 16, even 20 mules with a single line to the leaders. He was capable of killing a fly on the wheeler's butt with a bull whip without touching the mule. There was a gravity in his manner, and a quiet so profound that all talk stopped when he spoke. His authority was so great that his word was taken on any subject, be it politics or love. This was Slim, the jerk-line skinner. His hatchet face was ageless. He might have been 35 or 50. His ear heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. His hands, large and lean, were as delicate in their action as those of a temple dancer. He smoothed out his crushed hat, creased it in the middle, and put it on." Do you see what I mean about the language being grander? We'll talk more about the language in a second, but this stuck out in Chapter 2 a lot, because most of Chapter 2, like I said, is just characters talking. So, I have my passage. Now what? Well, now I've got to get beneath the surface of the passage, and the best way to dig your way underneath the surface is to reread the passage and then reread the passage. Read the passage multiple times, trying to get to something that is beyond just plot stuff. Try to get to something that the author's saying, something important. Once you feel like you get to something like that, then you're ready to go to the next step, and that's to really annotate the passage and look for the author's use of craft. So when you're looking at the author's use of craft, you're going to start out by just finding things. You're going to find a simile. You're going to find imagery. You're going to find a metaphor. You're going to find diction or tone. So at first you're just going to find it, but then of course you have to actually figure out what the author's intention was using those techniques, what they were trying to communicate. So some of the things we're looking for, like I said, diction, tone, mood, connections to themes, characterization, and then all the things that fall under the umbrella term of figurative language, things like metaphor, simile, hyperbole, personification. So as you look through your passage, look for these things. But of course, when you find an example of one of these, then your work has really just begun, because then you've got to think about it. So back to my passage. Through the magic of video creation, I will read it and annotate it in record time. Boom. Okay. I saw a lot of things in here. The first thing that I noticed was this diction up here that was all related. It used the word majesty and then royalty and then prince. All those things are related. So I noticed that. Those are obviously meant to impress the reader about Slim. I also noticed that the first sentence here is a dramatic entrance. A tall man stood in the doorway. It's meant to make the reader take notice, just as anyone else would take notice when Slim walks in. I noticed more diction, words like gravity and profound, all meant to express how deep and important a man like Slim is. I noticed a simile down here, that his hands were as skillful and delicate as a temple dancer, obviously meant to show you how skillful Slim is. A sentence like this was Slim, the jerk-line Skinner. Obviously that's dramatic too. So there's a lot of dramatic language. But the thing I noticed most was this sentence. His ear heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. And one of the ways Steinbeck makes the reader take notice of that is through syntax, which is sentence structure. So before that, you have 1, 2, 3 sentences that are really short. And then you have this longer sentence. So those short sentences set up this longer sentence, which makes you pay attention to it because it sticks out. But it also tells us that Slim has understanding beyond thought, which means most of the other men on the ranch don't really think about the other men, their peers, very much. There are no connections being made. But Slim, when he talks to someone, he really understands them, and that sets him apart. And we see that later on in Chapter 2 when he talks to George, and especially in Chapter 3 when he talks to George. He has a gift for understanding people, and that connects to the theme of friendship and isolation, because there aren't many friendships in this Great Depression world that we're set in the book. But Slim sticks out because he's different. I could write about any one of those things and make a pretty effective paragraph of analysis. So I'm sure in your book you can find a passage of similar depth and with similar use of craft by the author that you could analyze. You just have to find it and take the time to analyze it. So that is a very brief synopsis of how to find and close read a passage. Obviously, it takes a lot of practice, but hopefully you're getting that practice both in English class and on your own. So that's all I got. Mindeman out.